In the sport of luge, the start line represents the only chance for the athlete to physically propel his sled.
We often say that you can lose a race at the start, but you can't win a race at the start.
If he can't propel his sled 10 feet in 2 seconds, he can kiss his shot at a national championship goodbye.
In the sport of luge, we go down to the single thousandth of a second, and timing is everything. And anything you can do to accelerate the sled becomes critical.
This is a very important part of the track because it's really the only area of the track where you can physically accelerate the sled. So there's a lot of technique that goes into this start. If you have a slow start, you're dead in the water.
Like NASCAR, the tracks Tony runs on are different in every location, and the starting ramps can have a major impact on his performance.
There's 17 tracks in the world, and everyone is completely different. Flatter start ramps, we can actually paddle longer because it takes us longer to get up to speed. Whereas really steep ramps, you know, we might get in after 10 feet.
At the start line, Tony grips 2 handles as he rocks the sled back and forth, helping him generate as much inertia as possible.
So we rock back and forth on the handles, we pull off. We have metal spikes on our fingers that we use to paddle along and accelerate the sled as fast as possible before the first curve.
Having practiced his start routine thousands of times, Tony's instincts tell him whether he's come out of the gates fast enough, which sets the tone for his entire run.
When you do it well, you really get that feeling of, you know, I nailed it, and you know in your head that going into that first curve, you're on track for a good run.
At Las Vegas Motor Speedway, downforce is key for the 17 car to achieve top speed. But with Matt Kenseth's tires at max air, his center of gravity is higher, making the car more vulnerable to a rollover.
Driving off into the corners, hopefully the car's got a good balance getting in the corner, that he can drive it off in there, and it's got, you know, a good snug feel getting in the corner.
Every adjustment changes the car's balance, and finding the center of gravity is crucial to sticking to the track. But for Matt, it's also about instinct.
You can feel if you're right on the edge and you got everything out of the car. It's hard to explain how you know. It's just all by feel. It's just by the seat of your pants.
What Matt is feeling is a shift in the center of gravity, described by his team as too tight or too loose. Too tight means the car is pushing through the turn and not turning, which can result in a crash against the wall. Too loose means the back end wants to slide around, resulting in a spin out.
So you try to get that balance right from loose to tight as perfectly as you can, and then you try to maximize grip from there.
With NASCAR rules the same for every car, finding the perfect combination to gain any kind of edge over the competition is a constantly shifting puzzle.
Well, you don't know. It could be any combination of 100 things, and that's part of the struggle and the challenge and the interest of the sport. Trying to get the cars right, you might get both ends sliding the same, but you might still be a half a second off, so you got to look somewhere else.
For a luge slider like Tony Benshoof, the wind is the enemy, and he scrutinizes every part of his racing technique to make sure he minimizes drag.
Aerodynamics is crucial. We actually do a lot of testing in the wind tunnel. Every body is unique, and so there's very small, changes we can make to our legs and our shoulders and hands to reduce friction of the air. Very high feet and barely looking, shoulders back, just as flat as possible. Long and flat.
Tony's sled is engineered to slice through oncoming airflow, and picking up even 1,000th of a second could be the difference between making the cut and going home.
From an aerodynamic standpoint, you do not want to disturb the airflow onto the sled. Once our feet drop down, you start disturbing the airflow onto the sled. It's a bigger hole that you're punching in the air. It's not good. In our sport, we're fighting over hundreds of thousandths of a second. 0.2 of a second is an eternity.
Tony's bodysuit also affects his speed.
Our suits are made out of a sort of a shark skin-like material. It's basically 2 layers with a rubber membrane in between them. So air can't go through it, it has to travel over. We work really hard to have the fastest suits on the hill.
For the majority of his run, he'll barely look up to see what's coming to minimize the drag his head might cause.
The idea is to not look at all. Use a lot of peripheral vision. But every now and then you just have to take a real slight peek just to make sure you're where you need to be. And oftentimes that's at the exit of a corner.
Tony's body plays a big part in the aerodynamic equation. The slightest interruption in airflow, something so minute as a loose thread on his booty or one mistimed head tilt, can slow him down.
It's no different than sticking your hand out the car window at that speed. I mean, you can really feel the drag.
When his aerodynamics and center of gravity are in perfect sync, Tony knows he's in the groove and on his way to a fast qualifying run.
You know, it almost feels like a perfect golf swing.
With his 20 years of experience, he knows whether he'll qualify the moment he crosses the finish line.
Over the years, after thousands of runs, you get a pretty good gauge on where you're at as far as your time goes. But with that said, you know, you never know until you see that clock.